We're all doing what we can to stop the spread of COVID-19, and that includes wearing a mask when out in public. How you remove your mask matters too. Take it off from the back and be careful not to touch your eyes, nose, or mouth. Make sure to wash your hands when you're done. You should also wash your mask after each use. Keep masks you've worn in a sealed container until you can wash them. And remember, my mask protects you and your mask protects me.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending our first virtual summit. I'm Scott Polochik, Director of Business Development for ESPI and Chair for the Manufacturing Council of the Greater Lehigh Valley Chamber of Commerce. Would like to acknowledge a few of our Chamber board members that are in attendance: John Hayes, the Chair, Mary Lazicki, our Vice Chair, and Nancy Dishnot, our Executive Committee member. But most of all, I'd like to thank you for attending. Certainly, we would like it under better conditions and better circumstances and being in person, but this is the best way that we want to at least keep things moving and give a little information from the manufacturing side. When we sat down this year, we were looking at different areas to figure out the best way to present something that would be good for manufacturers. With COVID-19, many companies have had to make changes in their business, the way they do things, and certainly the way that their workforce is. As we're getting back into producing, a lot of experienced people and experienced employees have taken the shutdowns as times to leave the company, taking with them decades of knowledge. A lot of companies are using standardized work or standard work procedures to capture that knowledge. There's no replacement for the experience, but at least taking that knowledge and using it as a basis for training a whole new set of workforce. So we're hoping that today's panel and our discussion will be able to give you a few ideas and certainly put you on that path to getting back to some sense of normalcy. At this time, I'd like to welcome Senior Vice President of Member Relations, Gina Martins, to thank our sponsors.
Thank you, Scott, and good afternoon and welcome again to our Manufacturing Summit. Before we kick off this great program, let's take a minute to recognize and thank today's sponsors. Our presenting sponsor is First Trust Bank. First Trust Bank has been a part of our manufacturing programs and chamber initiatives throughout the year. You're going to hear from First Trust Bank in just a moment. Our corporate sponsor is Capital Blue Cross, also a strategic partner of the chamber. Capital Blue Cross offers exclusive signature health plans for businesses throughout the valley. Thanks to Ann, Chrissy, and the entire team at Capital Blue Cross. Our big thanks to our strategic partner, Workforce Board Lehigh Valley. They're also a platinum sponsor today. And now a few words from Workforce Board Lehigh Valley.
Good afternoon. I am Matt Powell with the Business Intermediary for the Workforce Board Lehigh Valley and Assistant Vice President of Government Affairs and External Relations at the Chamber. I also serve as the Manufacturing Committee Staff Liaison. As a business intermediary, I connect the Chamber's over 6,000 members to the workforce system through business-led partnerships like the Engage Business Outreach Program, Apprenticeships, and Career Pathways. The Workforce Board Lehigh Valley has worked with over 80 companies to develop customized career pathways for their businesses. The purpose of a career pathway is to tell everyone from job seekers, students, teachers, counselors, and even the whole community how to get from point A to point B to point C in your business. Career pathways are being used by companies just like you for recruitment, retention, and strategic planning. Bakerly just partnered with the Workforce Board Lehigh Valley to kick off Employer Wednesdays and use their career pathway as a tool for recruiting prospective job seekers during this event, which took place at the main CareerLink Center at 555 Union Boulevard in Allentown and our CareerLink location in downtown Easton. Take a look at the program and you will see Bakerly's career pathway and see why other companies such as Bebron, Precision Roll Grinders, Victaulic, ATAS International, and many others have chosen to use this tool as a recruiting for their business. We invite you to join the movement and to get started on your own career pathway by contacting my colleague, Ashley Laura, who's on the call today. Also, if you are interested in learning more about how your business can be featured during Employer Wednesdays, do not hesitate to contact me.
Thank you, Matt. Great stuff happening at Workforce Board Lehigh Valley. Let's also thank our host sponsor, Manufacturers Resource Center. You're going to hear from their president and CEO, Rich Hobbs, in just a few minutes. Our silver sponsors today are Service Electric Business, Mike Starner and your team. Thank you so much. And TD Bank, Matthew Henderson is with us today. Thank you. Our bronze sponsors, Crayola, the Chamber Health Marketplace, Enterprise System Partners Incorporated, From Electric Supply and 3M, Andre Hewitt Associates, and PSECU. Thank you again to all of our sponsors. How about a big round of applause? I can hear you clapping. All right, and now please welcome our presenting sponsor and Senior Vice President of Business Banking for First Trust Bank, Mr. Mark McLaughlin.
Thank you, Gina, for that nice introduction. And First Trust Bank is proud to be a presenting sponsor for today's Manufacturing Summit with the Greater Lehigh Valley Chamber of Commerce. This is a well-timed topic, COVID-19. This pandemic has really changed the way we act and how businesses are run. And today's discussion will be very lively about how we continue to be successful in our daily lives and also in our workplace. For those of you that are not familiar with First Trust Bank, the bank was founded in South Philadelphia in 1934 by Samuel Green, the bank's founder. Mr. Green was upset with the way people in the neighborhood were not able to obtain financing for mortgages or other necessary items. And so with a capital base of $7,500, Mr. Green was able to get the first license of a mutual savings in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and founded First Trust Bank. Today, the bank is run by Mr. Green's grandson, Richard. Richard Green has grown the bank to our present capacity of $4.7 billion. So think about being a $7,500 capital-based bank in 1934 and now being a $4.7 billion bank. But more importantly, we are a privately held bank. We're the largest privately held bank in our region, and we service our customers consist of privately held companies in our marketplace. We have been servicing customers and consumers in the Lehigh Valley since 1974. We stick to our knitting. We're not chasing after Fortune 1000 or Fortune 500 companies, but we're working with family-owned, privately held businesses, helping them with capital, working capital, capital for equipment financing, capital for owner-occupied real estate investment, or investment real estate for some of our developers. We provide treasury management solutions to keep your cash and your liquidity secure. For other services we provide 401k management, investment management services both for consumers and also for companies with our sister arm, First Trust Financial Resources. Let's think about when COVID first came to be a major player in our economy and in the way we do business. Back in April 3rd was day one of the PPP loan processing system. First Trust Bank was at the forefront of that. We were taking applications on the first day. And over time, we put together $400 million in loans to our customers, which we estimate saved 40,000 jobs with our customers' employees. So the timing today to talk about COVID-19 is as well. And we look forward to hearing a lively discussion with our panel. And more importantly, we thank the Chamber for allowing First Trust Bank to be present today and be a sponsor. I'm going to introduce Matt Henderson from TD Bank, and Matt's going to introduce the panel.
My name is Matt Henderson, and as was stated, I'm with TD Bank. I'm a commercial real estate manager and lender here on behalf of TD Bank. Good afternoon, and thank you for attending today. We're a proud sponsor of the Greater Lehigh Valley Chamber of Commerce and today's Manufacturing Summit. TD Bank is one of the 10 largest banks in the United States, providing more than 9 million customers with a full range of retail, small business, and commercial banking solutions. We are committed to our local businesses and communities we serve, and we look forward to spending this time with you today. Our three distinguished panels today are as follows. Executive Vice President of Carbon Light North America, Mr. Jeff Walsh. The Director of Knowledge and Education of Freshpet, Mr. Steve Boss, and Strategy Manager of Training and Development for the Manufacturers Resource Center, Ms. Angie Bove. Our moderator today is Mike Withka. Mike is the Senior Strategy Manager and Lean Coach for the Manufacturers Resource Center. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike. If anyone has any questions from me or wants any more information about TD Bank, I've added my information to the chat.
Thanks for that remote introduction. Hi, my name is Mike Withka, and with me today will be Angie Bove. We're going to take a few minutes before we hit the panel discussion to talk a little bit about process standardization, standard work, and job instruction as by way of an overview, and then get into some questions with the panelists. So process standardization or standard work is an important tool that every organization can use, whether it's a manufacturing organization, whether it's a service industry, even charities can use process standardization as a tool. If you have activities in your organization, you certainly have processes. And if you have processes, they can either help propel you towards your goals and objectives, or they can uniquely get in your way. So process standardization in today's climate is really important to focus on, because the people that you have working for you now may be somewhat unfamiliar with the work that you're asking them to do. So what process standardization and standard work can do for you in these situations is to help you create stability inside your organization so that you can meet your expectations of your customers. So what does process standardization do for us? Well, it helps describe what's normal. What are these processes supposed to do? What is the expectation of them? It also helps define the behaviors of the folks that are in the process, as well as the folks who are supporting the process. It declares what the resource requirements of the organization should be so that the right things are in place to make these processes behave correctly. And then lastly, probably more importantly, process standardization will help us see if there's an issue with our processes so that we can do timely problem solving to fix the things that are going wrong. There are four components that make up standardization I'd like to go through real quickly. The first is standards. What are the detailed specifications, whether it's an input, the process itself, or an output that we're shooting for? And if there was a question that standards actually ask an organization, that question would be as to what extent should we be doing something? The second component of standardization is job methods, also known as standard work. And this is a document of how the work should be done, knowing what we currently know today. And the fundamental question that we're asking in this component is, how should the work be done by everybody? The third component of standardization is job instructions. This, quite frankly, is a structured knowledge transfer for the purpose of building skill inside of our organization. And this is answering the fundamental question of why. Why should the folks that are part of our team do the work this way? What is the benefit to the organization and to them as individuals? And then lastly, the fourth component of standardization is a process check. It is a structured comparison of what's actually happening inside of our organizations compared to what should be happening. And the fundamental question being answered here is, how are we doing? These are the four components that we frequently see in standardization. Now, going back to the third one, job instruction, I want to highlight something that's really important, especially in this COVID-19 challenge that everybody's wrestling with today. We have folks who may be in a position to receive training and guidance from folks inside your organization. And the folks in your organization may be approaching the way that they transfer this knowledge differently. They may introduce variation to it. So JI is really important to be able to get that training function to be done consistently so that everybody will learn the job the same way. And Angie's going to give you a little bit more insight about that.
Thanks, Mike. So we're going to talk about job instruction now for a moment. And so my question is, well, why do we need to do job instruction? So let me ask you a question. How do you do your training right now at your facility? And so there could be a couple answers to that. Do you, one, maybe use your SOPs to do that instruction training? Do you possibly use your manuals to be able to do that training? Do you maybe have training curriculum that you use to do that training? Or maybe you take your people and you put them up to a seasoned employee, maybe somebody who has a lot of experience, and they shadow them, and that's how they learn to do that job. You know, those are all valid answers. We do and use all those to be able to do training. But what's the problem with that training? Well, here's the problem. What happens is we utilize all those ways to be able to train, and so now we have them trained, and now they go back and they go into their departments, they go back to their teams. Maybe they go on to a different shift, and now they're on the second shift or their third shift, but they were trained on first shift, and they start doing their job. And they're doing their job, and now their team lead comes to them, or their supervisor comes in and says, well, what are you doing that? Why are you doing it that way? And they say, well, I was trained that way. Well, that's not the way that we do it here. Oh, well, see, there's the problem. Because although we're utilizing maybe the same material, maybe we're using the same manual, maybe we're using the same SOPs, maybe we're using the same curriculum that was already written, but everybody is training them in a different way. So maybe we're using the same materials, but we're not training in the same way. And so that's where we have to kind of create that standard training. And that's where job instruction kind of comes into play. And so job instruction, if we take a look at what the definition of job instruction is to be able to remember, have somebody remember to learn something quickly, and they also need to be able to learn how to do it correctly, safely, and conscientiously. And that kind of is what the definition of job instruction is. And when we do that and we use this methodology, there's two main components of this methodology. One is how to instruct. We teach people how to be a trainer. And so being a trainer also takes soft skills, right? It's the technical part of it. It's being able to understand what the methodology is, but it's also part of that soft skills. And so how to train teaches trainers how to do that. And it has 4 components of that. We learn how to prepare the worker, how to be able to help and make people comfortable in learning something new. We present the operation. So how do you present the curriculum that you're going to be able to teach them? We show them how to try it out now. So now that the worker knows what the curriculum is, we give them that opportunity to be able to try it, and then following up. We can't just let somebody go and do that training. We need to make sure that we follow up, make sure that they're doing okay. And so how to instruct is part of that curriculum, part of that methodology of job instruction. And then secondly, we take people through of how to create that curriculum, how to create that training curriculum, the breakdown sheet. And the breakdown sheet consists of 3 components of that as well. And so we have important steps, key points, and reasons. An important step, part of that job breakdown, is anytime that you advance the work, anytime that you create something and you're getting to your end product, well, that's an important step. And so we create those important steps to be able to show people. A key point consists of 3 different things. One that can be anything that will make or break the job. The second would be anything that would injure the worker. Or the third would be anything that would make the job easier to do. And so those 3 things, a lot of that is that tribal knowledge. Those people who know how to do the job, well, we're going to share that and we're going to make that standard. We're going to make sure that everybody is doing that exact same thing, so everybody's doing the job that way. And reasons is we go back to this why. Well, why am I doing it? Why should I be doing it that way? And so we explain to people why they're doing that job. And so that is the job breakdown. So when you're doing JI, you're utilizing the soft skills, how we should train somebody and making them trainers. And then we're also giving them the curriculum of what it is that they are training. And that all fits into that standard work. And so that is what job instruction is. So between utilizing job instruction along with all your standards, you're able to help and get everybody on the same page. So we kind of give you an overview of what this all is. So let's go to our panel and be able to hear where some of this is happening and give you real life examples of that. So Mike?
So welcome to our panel discussion. We have Steve Voss from Freshman, and we have Jeff Walsh from Carbon Light Recycling. And what I thought we would do is maybe start off with somewhat of an open-ended question, being that we talked about standardization and standard work as well as job instructions. We'll start with Jeff. How have you used these topics, standard work and standardization, the general thing, throughout your career? I mean, what are some of the ways that you use it?
Well, at the end of the day, it's important to be efficient, meet your customer expectations, and to ultimately, make the company money. So, in order to do that, you have to get all the people on the same page. And standardization, standard work development help you do that. They help create a routine and help ensure people meet the objectives in a regular way, the same way all the time. And so even with COVID, for example, we had to learn how to do a few things differently. So as soon as we found out we were essential business, we had to understand what the requirements were. We had to then teach our people what they needed to do differently. We had to create distancing on our production process in different areas. So we had to do a lot of that through visual management and through the whole process. So, just one of the examples of that.
Okay. And, so Steve, this is coming your way too. So when you think about the work that you've done at FreshPet with job instructions, I guess in a COVID-19 environment, you probably have a lot of folks that were coming in and coming out. How has job instruction training helped you respond to some of the COVID-19 challenges?
It's kind of interesting. We had to do much the same thing that Jeff had to. We had to look at where we were training and how we were training any number of different people coming into the process. We had to look at where they were doing it. Where do you have to stand? What do you have to do? The essential training stays the same, but the process itself and the regulations that were put in place all had to be transcended or passed down to the employees as we went through as well. We went through all the same regulations and all the same processes for our people, and then it's just management of those regulations.
Okay. So while I have you on that topic, when you go through job instruction training and you begin to try to train people on something that's maybe new, how does the culture generally react to that? Do you have problems getting people to adopt new policies, or what have been some of your obstacles?
As far as the obstacles go, job instruction, the way we work it is pretty easy to do. We have a process, SOPs, that we had in place, and a lot of our job instructions came from SOPs, and so we just shortened them down into trainings that we could actually do with the individual. As we went through that process, any SOPs that end up getting changed come through the JIS as well. We then make those changes and we actually pull all of the people that are good as well as the new people. We gather them all up and we disseminate that information.
I think it's important to mention too that because you may have mentioned that you get pushback. The way to not get pushback is to involve your people. You have a requirement, you have a standard, you have something you have to meet, asking them for their help in creating that and how they intend to meet that and how they can make that, ensure that we get there is really important, because then they buy into it, they want to use it, and they're willing to follow it.
Right. Yeah, the other half to that was our entire program was actually developed by the employees. There wasn't a manager around. We set our experts from the floor in place to actually go through there, work with the SOPs, and also add in any of the nuances that Angie talked about, anything that's safe, anything that's easier to do, anything along those lines. So from the SOP and from the employee perspective who's actually doing the job, buy-in actually wasn't an issue.
Now, both of you guys have probably experienced this. I mean, FreshPet with your expansion, I think, Carbon Light with the fact that you're expanding as well, that you have new processes, you have new people, and maybe you even have new trainers. And one of the things that we're talking about highlighting in standardization is that the idea of training itself is a process. And like any other process, depending on the individual, it could be done one way or another. Did you guys wrestle with that as an obstacle where you had your trainers maybe not saying the same message or presenting information the same way?
One of the, we work across 3 different shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so in having such a varied group of people, in short, we have a large number of different trainers across all 3 shifts. The nice thing about JAI is that every one of these individuals can be that. They can be their own individual. The only thing that each one of them has that is exactly the same is the job instruction. And each one of them has that job instruction in front of them. How they get to that end, right, is up to them and the individual that they're working with. And so every trainer may do something a little bit differently, but the information that we're disseminating across all 3 shifts is exactly the same. And so we achieve the same goal with a whole bunch of different personalities to go along with it.
But to your point, for myself, I've got my team and myself manage 450 people across the U.S. So I'm managing what I expect from each organization across North America. So we have our corporate guiding policies, procedures, and guidelines that need to end up in a job instruction that all plants are doing the same, because our plants have to deliver the same type of material, same quality, same everything. So what we try to do is events like this and using Zoom and things like that, we try to do train the trainer so that we all train. We also meet on a regular basis so that our trainers give us feedback. What went well, what went wrong? How could one trainer, have they encountered something in the past that they were able to deliver a little bit differently to get a better response from the team? So it's a lot of communication. I mean, communication is one of the major breakdowns in the organization. How you communicate, how you train, and how you set expectations is important. And I think the trainer themselves, it's really important to have them on the same page. So we gauge ourselves, audit ourselves, and check against each other. But ultimately, we try to send the same exact message to all three, in our case, all four shifts. We do 365, 7 days a week, and then across all the North American entities.
I don't know if you've ever heard this from anybody before, but in some of my travels, in our travels, we've often heard people push back on standardization and say that it's robbing me of my creativity. And, I'm wondering if you've ever saw anybody kind of wrestle with why is it important to have a standard process? Isn't that common sense to do it that way?
You want to go for this one, or you want me to?
Either one of them.
Okay. We have a continuous improvement process, and in this continuous improvement process, the entire objective is to look at everything that we do, and if there's a more efficient way, or technology comes out with something, or a different piece of equipment, if there's a better way to do it, by all means, bring it into the plant. At that particular point, engineering comes into play, all the different departments. It's not just training at that point. We take continuous improvement, it goes through a process, you end up developing a process, what you have to do with this piece of equipment, and then you integrate and change what you have to, and then it's an entire process of retraining and going through. For us, continuous improvement is part of what we're doing. That's why we're in business. And it's an important part of what we want our employees to be able to see as well, is that we're changing with the times.
I think it's also, again, it's involvement, it's transparency, it's communicating the clear goals so people understand why they have to change. It's not just because we decide to change, and it's not a dictatorship. Standard work is not us dictating how it has to be done. It's asking, it's explaining what the standards or the requirements are, and how can they help us get there. And if it's true involvement, they will tell you how to get the job done easier and better than you probably could. Some of my I say this very lightly, some of my most laziest employments are some of my best employees are coming up with ideas on how to get it done quicker and better and more efficiently. So I think it's important that you get everyone involved, get their feedback, and then again, if they understand how much money it's costing, if they understand, what's really going on, they'll participate and they'll offer value. So I think it's important.
So it's almost like standard work is sort of like the rite of passage. It's what we all need to know before we start making meaningful improvements. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question for you. So how about this question? What happens when you go into a company that maybe hasn't had standard work before, hasn't had JI before, and now you want to implement both of those things? You want to put some standard work into it, or you want to do job instructions? How do you go about doing that in a work that you have any of that before?
It's kind of interesting in that our company, having started in 2006 and having developed an entirely new process in the pet food industry, SOPs weren't something that we could go out and just immediately go and set forward and put down. And so a lot of our processes, we defined everything that we could, but in looking at continuous improvement and everything else, there was a lot that wasn't in there. And so we went to the employees that were doing the job and involved them, brought them in, and brought the entirety, managers, supervisors, everybody in this process to develop the SOPs and anything that was in between that we had missed with those. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have an SOP. It doesn't mean you have to have a standard, but if you're going to go and do it, you can create your own standards within the process. If you don't have those in place, there's nothing that says you don't already know what you need to do. You just have to create them and then get them in on paper.
So we have a new process that we're starting up. So new production process, several different new technologies that are in place. And the best way is just to get started somewhere. The best way is to understand where your failure points are, get your employees involved, and then just understand how not to repeat the wrong history over and over and over again. So the best way is sit down with people, understand an issue or something that occurred, and then say, how can we standardize it? How can we create it so that the next guy, the next person, the next young lady that's on the job doesn't make those same kind of mistakes? And I think that it's important that everyone understand that employees want clarity. No one likes to come to work in a chaotic environment. They don't want to be wondering, well, should I go do that? Should I go do this? Should I go do this? They like clarity. And so if you can make the process as clear as possible, they enjoy their jobs just because they come in and they know, if this happened, I need to do this. If that happened, I need to do this. So job instruction, standard work, and standardization in general all drive clarity. And I think employees appreciate that.
You know, I was listening to you talk about something, and it got me thinking about another question. We kind of see how standardization is important to get consistency, but have you ever seen a situation where, you know, something was standardized? Maybe COVID-19 is a good background for this. That we've developed this COVID-19 process for doing something, and now suddenly we know a better way of doing something, and now suddenly the culture kind of rejects that change. It's like, oh, I got to standardize this again. I got to go through and train everybody again. Have you ever experienced it when a culture kind of rejects continuous improvement because standard's been done and the training's been done? They don't want to undo that. I'm just kind of curious. I've seen that a couple of times in my experiences.
I think everybody rejects change always. I mean, no one likes to change, especially creatures of habit. Your new employees will change quicker than a 30 or 10-year employee. I think that the trick to it is engagement, and again, showing value and setting a goal. I mean, helping them understand what direction they need to be in or where they need to go, because we keep people on their toes through our continuous improvement process, through the 8 Gs, through a lot of the different things that we do. So the innovation piece we try to drive and just keep people, we reward people for innovation to avoid pushback and avoid that kind of thing. So, I mean, if they help save us money, we give them a percentage of that sometimes back, or we'll give them through lunch slips or through dinners out, or, you know, something like that. But ultimately, it's about your, you know, kind of how does the system, what does this system do for the employees, or what does it do for the team, for the group? So how you acknowledge them and how you reward them for that, there's a lot of good ways to do that so that they don't reject it. But most of the time, you will get pushback. I mean, it just happens.
Yeah, great responses. I was asked to remind our audience in Zoom, if they have questions, to please post them in the chat room, and we'll take your questions as time permits. So I encourage you guys watching remotely to join in the conversation. So anyway, so when you look at some of the documentations that come along with standard work and job instructions in general, it feels as though we're creating a little bit of a paperwork burden, especially if you guys are working in places that have quality management systems or ISO or QS 9000. Does job instructions or standard work add to the documentation burden? Does it remove some documents? How you guys are approaching the mechanics behind that? I'm curious.
Interestingly enough, we're going through a process right now where we are looking at a training program or a training tracking program that takes all of our job instructions and everything that we have, and actually envelops that into the software itself, so that long-term goal, what we're shooting for, is completely paperless. So while right now there is a paper trail, as it were, to go through there, over the next few months, as we work forward through this, we're going to take all of these things and include them in the program. It'll also have an application that we can use out on the floor, and that way, using tablets, etc., all of our trainers will actually be doing everything via a tablet, completely paperless.
Okay, great.
I think technology in general is lending itself to what needs to happen with any system, standardization system or ISO or anything that you want to call it, in the fact that you have to audit your system on a regular basis. If it's not working, if you created something that, for instance, we had checklists, we created a dozen of them. At the end of the day, we found out that on the checklist, there was only the top section, this middle section, and the bottom section that were to be filled out. The people just weren't using the other sections. And when we went back and reviewed it, we realized that they weren't using them because they were covering a part of it in this document and a part of it in this document. No one wanted to fill it out once, and they were justified. We had to go back and learn how to rewrite our documents. Also, there's new videos that say a lot more than the documents. You have to use that technology, and you have to constantly go back. It's a continual improvement process. Standardization, even when you know what the requirements are, you've got to go back and look and understand, does it still make sense? Do you need to improve it? Can you make it more efficient? Lean's all about eliminating the waste, and even in these processes, you generate waste, but you have to kind of evaluate from time to time.
It's funny, you both talked in exactly with the question that I was going to ask, but I mean, you talk about clarity, and then you take from that clarity, you talk about organization. When we're talking about standard work, we're talking about job instruction, you're talking about training. I mean, there's a lot of documentation about that. There's a lot of tracking about that. You touch on ISO. But I mean, even if you go a step further, well, what about HR? And what about the supervisory and being able to use that to develop people and be able to do that? I mean, there's a lot of arms, there's a lot of legs to be able to do all of that. And that was kind of my question about, well, how do you deal with all that? How do you deal with all those people who are involved in that? How do you deal with the organization and making sure that it's clear? And how do you keep all that organized in that?
So for me, it's about structure. And I'll tell you, when I first started, I've been involved in manufacturing for 35 plus years. One of my first jobs was they handed me a manual that was this thick. And I am not even joking. It was like several of these binders that were that thick. And my first inclination was, how does an employee care about all of this? But they don't. They can't. They care about parking here, and a parking there, and a parking there. So for me, it was about creating a system and a way for somebody to quickly look. In this case, it was an organizational term, and it wasn't people. It was our books, and said, if you're on this line, click here, and everything that you need to know about that line is right there. And that made the system efficient. Employees were like, yeah, I don't care about all of that. I just need to run my line, and here's what I need to know. So they would click. They would save a shortcut to that single link because they didn't care about the whole policy and procedures. And they would run their production line perfectly just by referencing that. But when you give them a book like this and ask them to read it, I mean, it doesn't have, they don't have it.
I'm running the same line. For me, I look at the owners of whatever the process is. And so whatever you're looking at, it doesn't matter whether it's shipping and receiving, it doesn't matter whether it's production, it doesn't matter whether it's maintenance guys. Everybody has their own little portion of the book that they want to look at. And when you go out to talk to the managers, the department managers, and they gain their understanding, and then the idea at that point is they only want to own what they want to own. It's just that simple. Just exactly right on that. And so you sit down and you talk to them about what they own. They don't need to know about everything else that's going over here. It's just stuff that's going on around them.
So when you talk about that clarity of organization, and we talk about all the standardization in the job, the job instructions, people kind of know a little bit more of the path, and they're getting information that they truly want. And this is just out of curiosity, has any of this stuff, having standard work, having the job instructions, having those clear paths in it, has this helped in hiring? Has this helped in keeping people on board and keeping people tenured by having some of the standard work in place?
Absolutely. For us, our process, our business is growing at a rate of about 30%, 25 to 30% a year. This is not only in sales, but also in volume. And we're bringing on numbers of people, large numbers of people at a time as our process grows. And so this has helped us extremely and I'll go back to what was said earlier. The fact that you have a structure, the fact that you can come in and you can tell someone exactly what they're going to be doing, the fact that you from day one, you can plan out what their career is going to look like, what they're going to be doing, how they're going to be doing, who they're going to be interacting with, If you have the plan in place and all they have to do is follow the path, then you gain an immediate understanding from them. This is a place that I can grow. This is a place I can get better. This is a place that I can make more money. This is any number of different things, but the path is there. Go for it.
There was something that I read earlier in one of the questions, which is what's the cost to implement the system? My response to that is the cost is far less than to not implement the system. Because at the end of the day, it's all about efficiency. So whether you're onboarding and bringing in a new hire, your efficiency to get them here, help them understand what has to be done, and get them out on the floor doing work. And if you have a efficient process that dictates that, they're out there doing. Otherwise, they're out there figuring it out, making mistakes, quality complaints, safety incidents. All of those things happen because it's not clear. And when they're in that chaos, there's a lot more damage and cost than when you clarify what needs to be done so they do it.
I just got a chat room question. So, I almost hate to ask this question with Steve up for his role, but the question is, what makes a good trainer? So I guess in the context of standard work or job instructions, what are the attributes of somebody that would be successful in that role?
Funny part is I'm originally from Kansas, and so I kind of do the down home thing. I think the first thing, and it comes over here in what Angie was talking about earlier, and I think one of your first indicators is can someone sit down and have a conversation with anybody? You have to have that one-on-one. I don't want to say it's not like bonding. We're not getting that far into it, but a lot of people when they walk in, it's completely unknown. You don't know where the bathroom is. You don't know where the lunchroom is. Anything is, as far as everything goes out there. And it's just looking for someone who can actually have that conversation, have that point of communication, someone who can actually get in and get someone talking, get them asking questions and doing that. Someone who has that kind of ability for me, we already have outlined all of the technical stuff. But you need to have someone that can draw those questions out and make them go through that process and build on and actually to just build a relationship with that individual.
Great. In my experience has been that you need somebody that's fairly humble and somebody that can talk to the audience and understand who their audience is. I agree. You've got to be able to connect. And I think part of your responsibility in being a trainer is to understand your content and to be able to articulate it. But you have to listen. You have to watch to see if your people are engaged or not engaged. So it's important just to be what I would consider a real person and somebody maybe has been in the trenches and somebody that understands work and somebody understands what the employees feel. And this too often dictatorship. It's our rules. We're going to tell you how it needs to be done. And it's not really about that. It's an engagement. It's a back and forth that you need to have. And so a good trainer can grab people, get their attention, make them feel involved, get them excited, make them laugh, make them cry in some cases. And that's super important.
That's excellent. Great insights. Another question that we got from the chat room regarding COVID-19 is probably more of an open-ended question. Have you guys experienced any issue in your organization in putting a new COVID rule in place or a new COVID standard in place where it was questioned or it was hard to get the culture to move on that? So, if either one of you have an example of that.
I say yes, and I say initially the entire onset of this is a large change. And I'll go back to employee involvement, and I'll go back to all of the different things, especially as people are coming in. The hardest part is, I think, from our perspective, we have the things that we have set in place, and over the course of time and communication, people have gotten used to it. The hardest part is sitting down, and Jeff said that he's a tier 1 company. We also are tier 1. Is what happens after the fact. We set all of these things in place for our company, and their great response is great as far as that, and we limit exposure while you're at work. But how do we get the employees to take that same concept of thinking and take it outside as well? and that's been the hardest part is trying to elevate, where that is and what exposure can do, not only to our workplace, but to them at home.
We got a ton of pushback. I mean, for us, right away, I was on the phone with the governor's office. I was on the phone with the chamber. I was trying to understand what the requirements were. We started initializing the initial procedures, and based on the CDC guidelines and everyone else's guidelines, they've got to wear masks and you got to do this. We got that. There was 3% of the population that was saying, this is a conspiracy, I'm never not doing this, I can't do this, but throwing all that, I mean, at the end of the day, it was more like, well, here's our company, and this is how we're going to behave. And so these are the requirements for you to come to work. So, but I mean, we ran into a lot of that, and I mean, we had getting people to behave outside of work too. You can require certain things when they're at work, but when they're outside of work, they can do whatever they want. And for my Dallas client, it was terrible. I mean, because Dallas, and again, nothing against the state of Dallas. I mean, just that it was a different culture, and people down there were still going and having parties and doing things. That's it. So it was a tough thing.
So, it almost gets back to that whole question of what makes a good trainer, right? Because you guys kind of highlighted the need to be able to have a one-on-one with somebody, in order to be able to, give them the reason for it and explain why. And it sounds as if you both presented a case that, for COVID changes, that you really need to explain that. And hopefully when they, at the end of the day, that understanding why is still with them, so that their behaviors outside of work are consistent and aligned with their behaviors inside of work.
I from our environmental health and safety, our quality people, even our CEO, and from all of those people, they went through. We did videos that went through. And we actually put into our LMS system weekly emails, all of the different things going through their communication. I think is the key to all of this as far as going in there and getting everybody involved from that perspective. That's the only way you can actually take, when the CEO is sitting there going, this is important and here's why, right? When you get those kinds of letters and that kind of communication coming from, everybody from the top down, then you hope, that all of the relevance carries out when they walk out the door. That's the only thing you can do is hope.
Thanks. Actually, I have two questions coming up, and they're both from the chat room. So one question has to do with, I think we may have touched on this a little bit earlier, but maybe we can go a little bit deeper. And this isn't suggesting anything about you guys, but have you guys seen any differences, generationally speaking, in being able to develop your standard for job instruction to get people to follow COVID rules? So not me, it was the chat room that asked the question. So anybody want to answer that? So any generational differences?
I heard 2 or 3 questions in there. So let's narrow it down.
Sure. So you want me to?
Yeah, I want you to narrow it down. Yes. Which one?
So from does your training method or your method of being able to relate to a person with regard to change, is it different when you're talking to one generation versus another? So as an example, a younger generation, somebody who is entering the workforce, in their early 20s, does your approach to being able to get them to understand the need for change, COVID response or whatnot, is that a little different than when you would have?
Okay, go for it.
So the answer is yes, and the answer is I'm not going to pick on the new or old generations. But actually, I came to you guys with the same exact question. And one of the things that I saw in your documentation, which is one of the best things that I think I've seen to date, was you list several generations, Generation X and the millennial groups and all of those groups, and you said your class or your subject in that case talks about what's important to each group and how can that group function as one group. I think that's pretty critical because, again, I think there's a lot of different cultures, backgrounds, generations that have different points of view for a lot of different reasons. At the end of the day, we have regulations, we have requirements that we have to meet. Understanding how to work with them is super important. and I'm still learning how to do that. So I don't think there's a bullet out there or some golden wand or hair cotter thing, but at the end of the day, it's a challenge. It is a challenge.
A person's a person is a person. If you take all of that out of the equation and you just focus on what the individual is, then none of that matters. It doesn't matter what you do, you have to get down to the individual's level and you have to get across to them. And the bottom line of all of this is that bottom thing that we had, that Angie had in the corner, is why. There is a reason for everything that we do, regardless of age, creed, color, whatever you want to get into, racial, all whatever. Here's why we have to do it. And this is what you have to understand. It crosses all boundaries.
Excellent, thank you. We have time for one more question. And I guess this one you're going to have to reach down deep for. So the question is how do you guys attribute the success of your company when we think about where you are at this moment and you think about your challenges that you're facing today? What is making Carbon Light successful in being able to operate in today's challenges, and what's making Fresh Bet successful as well? What do you guys attribute that to?
A lot of hard work, I think. I think at the end of the day, you have to learn from history. You have to learn from your mistakes. And so if you're not focused on change, if you're not focused on eliminating repetition or repetitive mistakes that happen, you're not focused on yield in your customers, then you're not focused on the right things. I think ultimately, like I said, it's about focus and it's about understanding what your customers are willing to pay for and then tailoring all of these programs to meet those goals. That would be my answer.
For us, I would add all of everything that Jeff said, and I would add to it from our upper management has this great ability to go through here and to put a vision into everybody's head and a picture, as it were. And if everybody seems to, in this organization, seems to grasp the idea, they have their own little portion of the picture. And I'm going to function and I'm going to work to make my portion of the picture successful. Unfortunately, no picture ever goes together without attaching to another portion and something else. And so everybody in our organization ends up learning a piece of someone else's picture. And so we have, over the course of time, not only built the picture of success, right, but everybody has grasped not only their picture, but also part of somebody else's. And the picture is constantly changing. And so depending upon what you're doing and what you're not, it's evolving with that change.
Great. I appreciate that. We're approaching wrap up here, but I want to just take a moment and thank you on behalf of all the organizations that you've heard from today for one, all of your hard work, not just in what you do daily, but also the fact that you, as manufacturers, have done a fantastic job of meeting these crazy challenges that we've suddenly been faced with. And also on that note, thank you for taking time out of your schedules to do this, because with all those challenges comes a whole bunch of effort. And right now, as you're sharing your stories, you're busy not putting out fires or whatever back at your place. So we appreciate you taking time to do this. It was great hearing from you. We're going to transition over to Scott real quick for a quick moment.
At this time, for our close, I'd like to introduce President and CEO of MRC, Mr. Rich Holland.
Really appreciate that. I think we had a good session today. The virtual format is certainly challenging, and I'd like to thank the team here, especially Liz, Angie, and Mike for the fine job that they did, and also to thank the panelists. I thought they gave some really good answers. I've worked 35 years or so in manufacturing, and for me, this stuff is kind of basic 101. And a lot of the questions and answers took me back to some things I remember deeply, in my past as well. So really a good presentation. I brought a lot of context and color, I think, to a topic that we can all learn some things from. And wanted to also thank our sponsors, all the sponsors that helped put this presentation together. So I guess with that, maybe the next one will be a live one, face-to-face, but this one worked out pretty well virtually. So hope everyone enjoyed it, and thanks to everyone again, and have a good rest of the day.